Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, regulatory landscape, and capital markets. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the Nasdaq market site, we have Helena Almeida, Vice President and Managing Counsel and AI Legal Officer at Nasdaq Listed and Nasdaq 100 constituent ADP, Maria Colacurcio, CEO of Syndio, and Stephanie Pender, U.S. and Canada leader at Mercer. We're here to discuss preparing for the EU AI Act and how to turn regulations from a cost center to a competitive advantage. It's great to have all of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. Helena, let's kick it off with you. The EU AI Act, what is that going to mean for companies?
So the EU AI Act is the world's first comprehensive framework for regulating how AI is used. And it means different things for different companies, but crucially for a lot of the things that our viewers are thinking about, it's how do you use it responsibly? How do you use it in a transparent way to make sure that you're meeting those obligations? There's risk tiering that happens on this. Some of the provisions of the EU AI Act have been in place since last year, like provisions that are prohibiting really unacceptable uses of AI, like manipulation. We're gearing up now for really putting in those regulations and those requirements for what's considered high-risk use cases of AI. And that includes, in the employment context, things like using AI to make decisions on promotions and hiring and things like that. So what I really want to focus on, though, is how it's not just a compliance checkbox, right? EU AI Act is, yes, you can check the boxes, you can make sure you're complying, but it is really an opportunity for companies and for businesses to think about how to take their AI responsibly, transparently, and make it a competitive advantage.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point, Maria, that Helena makes is it's not about a cost center, it's more of a competitive advantage. And I think if you can strategically unlock this and get out of it's just compliance framework, that it does lend to being a leader within your space.
That's exactly right. And if you think about what's happening in the macro, this is happening at the exact same time as the EU Pay Transparency Directive is coming into effect in June. And this is a regulation, not a directive, which means it just happens. You don't have to wait for your jurisdiction to transpose it. And what we saw with the EU Pay Transparency Directive is it started to really influence how California, New York, other states were thinking about transparency regulation and the acceleration of that across states. And the companies that really leaned in and started to think about how do I want to be more transparent? How do I not think about state by states posting job ranges, but I'm just going to do it for the nation even though it hasn't gotten that far? They really saw a competitive advantage in terms of getting more candidates and being more seen as top of the marquee in terms of a place to work.
Yeah, and Stephanie, how are you balancing accountability with innovation?
Yeah, so sometimes this act is thought of as anti-innovation, but it's actually pro-responsible innovation using AI. Because what it's saying to companies is, we want you to understand what AI solutions you're using or might be using, where the risks are, and how to incorporate more transparency, documentation, and human oversight into your people and financial processes. And when you think about the people processes, and that would include things like hiring, paying, rewarding, developing, all of those, there's a lot of risk in that just with the human piece of it. Yeah. And now AI can help in terms of mitigating that risk and actually arming businesses and leaders with more of a tool, more financial rigor, more discipline in doing some of these things that in the past there really wasn't a lot of rigor around.
Right, so if we're thinking about the US through the lens of leading in innovation, why should business leaders care about the EU AI Act?
Well, first of all, every major stakeholder for businesses is interested in AI. So business leaders are being asked by investors about how AI is being governed. Employees are asking about AI in terms of, can I trust the AI to make decisions about myself? And boards are asking leaders about how AI is being used responsibly and fairly. And if that isn't enough to convince you that business leaders should care about the AI and using it for innovation and for other good, the biggest the biggest expense for many companies is its compensation spend. And so when you think about that, and there's just less rigor around that spend than, say, like a supply chain line item would be. And so for that compensation spend, now there's the opportunity to innovate in that space and allow for greater usage in terms of how jobs are evaluated, benchmarked against the marketplace, what your pay is communicated to you. And so companies will be able to do that more with their employees.
And just to drill down on that, when you talked about employees and employees making sure that they trusted what they were seeing and making sure that they trust the algorithm was treating them fairly, think about the flip side of that is if you lose that trust, right? You lose your ability to recruit talent. You lose your actual talent. You lose productivity, engagement. I mean, the impacts of not paying attention to the stakeholders' concerns, including your employees' concerns about AI, are huge.
So this is an acquisition and talent retention tool as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the way that companies can communicate about the way they're using AI, that they care about it being transparent, fair, responsible, and that they are communicating to all of their stakeholders, including candidates and employees, that they want to be using this in a responsible way, in a fair way, that is going to pay huge dividends. Yeah. Exactly like the pay transparency comparison.
Yeah, and thinking about the as compared to what. So if you think about what AI is making possible is analyzing big swaths of data. So you mentioned compensation. Think about how we make those decisions today. If you think about, I want to make the best compensation decision, I want to take into account our compensation policies and market rate and what my existing employees are paid, and I want to know what the last 10 offers I made are. That would take me weeks to figure out how to get to that exact right number. And AI gives us the ability to actually gather all that information, consolidate it in seconds, and actually recommend a decision that's more consistent with policies than in many ways a human would. And so that human is still in seat of making that decision, but the AI is able to crunch all that information, take the decisions that have already been made in terms of policies and serve up to the human. I think this is where you want to go with this for these various reasons. And the key part of the AI Act that makes it really powerful is it requires technology vendors to actually show their work. And it's the showing of the work that generates the trust, and it's the showing of the work that gives confidence to the decision maker, again, the human, being that human in the loop, the decision maker, that they're making the right call based on the information that they've been able to crunch in seconds.
So it's opening up new markets as well, right? Reg tech as an example.
Absolutely. It's opening up new markets, and that's where companies have to be really careful about the high risk moniker. It's not high risk in how you would think of an 80-year-old having open heart surgery. It's high risk in that what it really means is there's regulatory compliance and transparency requirements that vendors and technology-oriented companies have really got to be rigorous in how they create these new solutions leveraging AI to be safe, to eliminate bias to the degree that they can do it even better than if humans are doing it in conjunction with the technology.
And I would say that, you know, what we heard from boards and from business leaders over the past several years, it started with, are we sure we should be using AI? It seems risky, not quite sure where to deploy it. Fast forward just a year or two, and the conversations are more like, are we going to fall behind if we don't start using it? Where should we be deploying it? What is the low, medium, and high risk? And there's the questions of, are we using AI for our solutions, and or are we using AI for internal purposes? And the answer is both. And it's critical because that's what leads to innovation. Innovation is both in terms of the products and solutions that a company is developing, and they're all, you listen to any earnings call right now, and they're always talking about how their AI solutions, I don't care what industry it is. And now they're also talking about how they're deploying AI internally to help their workforce perform at a much higher level.
Yeah, and Helena, you make an excellent point in your notes here that start an AI inventory.
Oh yeah, so I mean, so companies are all over the place in terms of their comfort level with AI and how much they want to use in their workforce, but they're all concerned about where to start, right? How do I start in making sure that I'm complying with this? You know, there's some companies have been using it. We've been using ADP. We've been using AI for a long time at ADP, so we have kind of a comfort level. And we're working towards early compliance with the different aspects of the EU Act and other laws. But if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you're feeling like, where do I start? I think an inventory is the key thing that will set you up and have a great foundation for complying with the AI, with the EU Act and all of the laws that are coming in the United States and across the world, because AI has a tendency to kind of drift into your vendor products where you don't really have enough information about it. You might not know all the different ways that AI is being used in your workplace and in your processes. Getting that inventory so you can at least start that process of doing the risk tiering, understanding how the data is used, understanding where a human in the loop should be. It all starts with the inventory.
Yeah, I mean, especially at the outset of this, of course, AI has nothing to do with the financial services and you know, other industries adjacent. it feels as if when ChatGPT became part of the consumer vernacular that there was this rush internally and externally to supply some sort of product, whether or not there was a problem that needed to be solved. Yeah. And I think some of those gaps and vulnerabilities are being exposed, and that's why when you're talking about understanding your risk framework, it's critical. Even in the outset, let's say, for example, you're an employee and you're using Copilot because it just happens to make your PowerPoint presentation flow more efficient. Perhaps you're not even doing this with malintent, but you put critical data in there by accident. And I think it's taking companies some time to catch up and really understand where the risk lies.
Yeah, and to be able to ask your vendors the right questions about how they're protecting your data and how they're making sure that that any personal private data that we have on our employees is being protected before it hits an LLM.
That's critical because so many use cases that are out there right now, I hear a lot of companies saying, well, we could just plug our data into a generic LLM or enterprise ChatGPT or use something like that. But you have to ensure that the guardrails that the EU AI Act is really trying to push are there and required, and a lot of that's about mitigating bias and in decision making and making sure, again, we're showing our work. The initial sort of AI 1.0 that I heard in board meetings was all about cost efficiency. People were just talking about how do we use this to save money, and what you're starting to see in sectors like manufacturing, ironically, is they're the ones really leading the charge to say, how can we use AI to drive innovation in the products we deliver? So how do we embed this to ensure competitive advantage that our products are more innovative than our competitors, which is sort of wave 2 to me, that we're going to move off of this focus on let's use this to save money to let's figure out how we use this to increase revenue.
Right, or to extract the value. We know it creates efficiencies. Okay, what's next, right? Like what's your ROI going to look like beyond that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a good way that companies are thinking about how to enhance the learning and development skills of their own employees. So you take a manufacturing company or any company that has warehouses and they're putting in more AI and automation into their plants. And so it is, yes, it is replacing activities that those plant workers are doing, but those workers are being trained on how to use those machines.
And crucially, that's the part that matters, right? You have to teach people how to use it and what AI is good at, what AI is not good at, so we can bring along the entire workforce.
And employees are asking, here's maybe a number one question that employees are not asking. How are you, employer, going to keep me relevant for the workforce of the future? And so they're not going to be kept relevant by having AI guarded off. You have to start incorporating AI automation technology into what you're doing.
Yeah, it's change management.
Yeah, yes, change management. And that's why the human in the loop and the change management piece of it is critical. You're not just going to put a bunch of equipment in the gym and hope that people will know how to use it.
Right.
You actually have to train them on it.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you're thinking about redundancies, and if something happens, you can't just flip a switch and we go back to 10 years ago when everything was on-prem, right?
Yes,
so,
right.
But I think it's a great point that you make. We're bringing the workforce along and building confidence because there is anxiety there.
Right, exactly. It's like what Helene said. You can write the best algorithm, but if the managers or the employees don't trust it, it's never going to be used. And so you have to find a way to have them trust it, and there are ways in terms of communication, transparency, and role modeling. And so leaders, at Mercer, I'm a very big advocate of how to use AI responsibly, both internally and externally. We have our own enterprise-wide LLM that we use, and so we are able to start to train our people on how to do that.
So, Helena, in the absence of a U.S. regulatory framework, are you recommending that companies still get their governance framework and making sure their stakeholders are all aligned? Because, this is going to be a strategic shift.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, so many companies are actually doing business in and have their products and services touch the EU. So it does impact many companies in that way. But even absent that, I think the foundation, the principles of the EU AI Act in terms of transparency and testing and reporting, those kind of foundational requirements are part of every AI act that we're seeing, every proposal that we're seeing. So while we might not have in the US sort of a one holistic piece of law like we do in the EU, it's an important opportunity to align your legal, your risk, your HR, your tech, put together a holistic governance program that has those foundations of transparency, explainability, and trust in it, human in the loop. And that way you're ready for your future proofing.
Because the worst thing is if you lump if you lump high risk and you decide, well, these things are high risk, any employment decision, any recommendation about employment decisions, any recommendations about how I treat my employees, if you lump all the things in high risk and say, well, I'm just not going to touch any technology for that because it's high risk, it's scary, you are going to be so far behind.
Right. Exactly.
So it's really about setting in place some of the governance structures that we've been talking about, making sure you understand how to evaluate technology and making sure that it does show its work, that it's transparent, that it's clear, the algorithm is shown. And then once you do that, you can go attack those high risk areas in a way that's really going to drive your business forward. And not only that, it's going to give confidence to your employees that you are pulling bias out of the system, that you're making decisions with more data in the moment. You're taking into account the decisions that your executive team has already made in terms of how people are going to be treated. But I think the worst thing you could do is say, these areas are high risk, so I'm only going to tackle the low value, low risk areas of AI adoption, because you're not going to get the value for your business.
Right.
You're not going to be competitive if you shy away from high risk.
Especially if you can't articulate that to your vendors, to your partners,
Exactly.
to your clients.
Yeah.
Why are they going to want to do business with you? Because they're all, they have their own governance frameworks in place as well.
You'll
and you're just
quickly
going to
look
miss
archaic.
so much.
Yeah.
You're going to miss so much because it takes such a big swath.
It'll be more costly at the end of the day if you wait.
Yeah.
In terms of money and training.
Employees do not want to work for a dinosaur. They want to work for a company that they see is starting to incorporate more of this modern way of working, and that includes AI.
Yeah, it certainly does. But I think it's so interesting how the conversation has changed, Helena, from simply checking the boxes and going through compliance exercises where it's not a set it and forget it scenario anymore. The technology is just evolving too quick.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think you could comply with pay transparency requirements by setting a minimum salary on a job requirement and calling it a day, right? But that wasn't really where people were getting the most value out of it. In order to not leave value on the table, you need to think about this as a strategic opportunity and not just a compliance box checking exercise, and really think about how you can show your company's values through a responsible AI program. And that includes, for example, things like deciding what you'll let AI do with respect to candidates and what it won't. At my company, humans will always be the person who is extending the offer to the new candidate. Humans will always be the person who will meet the new hire on that first day and show them the ropes, right? Sure, we could have AI kind of send memos and emails, but you can think about how you're showing your company's values through a responsible AI program and deciding where the humans fit in.
All right.
Yeah. It's cracking open. If you think about the directive and the EUA Act, they're so similar because what it's cracking open is, why do you pay what you pay? So first you have to post the range, but then you have to articulate what are the things that you value in your company, and then you have things like right to information where employees can ask for comparable salaries of peers. It's very similar in the UAI Act. It's why are these policies in place the way that they are? Why are you training the model the way that you're training it? And what's behind some of these algorithms in terms of what's feeding it in your company?
Yeah. All right. Appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. And thanks for joining me from MarketSite. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.